When I pulled my old truck onto the gravel road that snaked its way up the wooded ridge, the late afternoon sun was filtering through the trees in a way I had almost forgotten existed. It had been 3 years, 3 long years, since I last saw my cabin. The place wasn't grand or luxurious. It wasn't the kind of log home you'd find on the cover of a glossy lifestyle magazine. It was a weathered structure I had built up from scraps and sweat, set back against the pines overlooking a small pond. To me, though, it was more than lumber and nails. It was freedom. It was peace. It was where I had once gone to escape the noise of the world. Life had pulled me away in the cruelest of fashions. My father had fallen ill, and the family obligations that followed demanded all of me, my time, my money, my attention. What I thought would be a short departure stretched into years, and in that time I had no choice but to let the cabin sit. I paid the taxes, I kept the small parcel of land under my name, but I had no time to visit, no energy to maintain it, and certainly no thought that anything would change. After all, it was my land. A deed with my name on it rested in the courthouse records. It was remote enough, and no one lived directly on top of me. Surely it would be just as I left it. But as the truck rolled slowly around the bend and the familiar shape of the cabin came into view, my stomach sank. Something was off. Something was wrong. The first thing I noticed wasn't the cabin itself, though I could see the faded green of the tin roof through the trees. No, it was the signs. Bright, bold, aggressive signs hammered into posts and trees all along the edge of my property line. No trespassing, private property. Violators will be prosecuted. Some were freshly laminated, some crooked from weather, but all screamed the same message. And what chilled me most was that they weren't mine. I slammed the truck into park on the edge of the drive, climbed out, and pulled the nearest sign off the tree. The plastic rattled in my hands, cheap hardware store kind, with bold black letters stamped over an orange background. On the back, in faint Sharpie, was a set of initials. K.H. K.H.? I muttered aloud, running a hand over my jaw. Then it hit me. The stories I'd heard from the handful of other cabin owners on this ridge came flooding back. About a year ago, the Property Owners Association, something I had always avoided, had apparently crowned itself with more authority than it legally possessed. And leading the charge? A woman named Karen Hargrove, or, as folks referred to her, simply Karen, the self-appointed guardian of community standards. And here she was, leaving her mark on my land. I ripped the sign from the tree and tossed it into the back of my truck, my pulse quickening with a mix of disbelief and fury. Trespassing? On my own property? The audacity was staggering. Still, I told myself to breathe. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she had plastered these signs everywhere, paranoid about teenagers sneaking into abandoned lots or hunters wandering too close. But as I walked further up my gravel driveway, I realized this was no random mistake. Every 20 feet, another sign. Some nailed into trees I had planted myself. Others tied to posts with zip ties that glared like neon warnings in the woods. It wasn't just protective. It was territorial. By the time I reached the cabin clearing, my blood was boiling. My porch, once bare except for an old rocking chair, now had a chain stretched across it with yet another laminated notice. HOA property. Entry strictly forbidden. I stood there, stunned. My own front porch. My own door. That's when I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel behind me. I turned just as a sleek white SUV rolled up the drive, stopping far too close to my truck for comfort. The driver's side door swung open and out stepped a woman in her late 50s, her blonde bob perfectly coiffed, her sunglasses oversized, her posture sharp enough to slice glass. She carried herself with the exaggerated confidence of someone who had never once doubted their authority. "Well, well, well," she said, her voice dripping with mock surprise. I was wondering when the squatter would finally show his face. "Excuse me?" I shot back, fists tightening at my sides. She didn't flinch. She walked right past me, her designer shoes crunching on the gravel, and gestured broadly toward the cabin as though she were showing off her own property to a guest. "You can't just waltz in here after 3 years and expect things to be the same. This land has been maintained by the HOA in your absence. You abandoned it. And by our bylaws, abandoned properties fall under association jurisdiction. Those signs, they're for your protection and everyone else's. I blinked, trying to comprehend the sheer gall it must take to stand on another person's land and say such things. First off, I said slowly, fighting to keep my voice level, this is my property. I paid the taxes. I have the deed. Second, I didn't abandon anything. Life pulled me away, but I never once surrendered ownership. And third, I held up the sign I'd ripped down. You're trespassing right now. Her lips curled into a smirk that could have cut stone. Oh, please. You'll find that the rest of the neighborhood agrees with me. We've worked hard to keep this community safe and orderly while you were off, wherever you were. The cabin was deteriorating. Teenagers tried to break in. There were reports of squatters. The HOA voted to take protective action. If you had been here, perhaps you'd know what's been going on. But since you weren't, she let the words trail off like she was scolding a child. Rage rose in me like wildfire. Lady, I don't care about your HOA. I never signed up for it. This land has been mine since day one, and you have no right to step foot on it, let alone plaster your little dictatorship signs everywhere. Her expression hardened, the smirk vanishing into a sneer. If you don't comply, I'll be forced to report you. You may own the deed, but ownership does not excuse you from community bylaws. And let me assure you, I always win these fights. I took a step closer, enough that she had to tilt her head back slightly to maintain eye contact. Report me for what? Trespassing? On my own porch? That flicker of hesitation in her eyes was almost satisfying. Almost, but she quickly recovered, straightening her posture. Don't test me. This isn't over. We'll see what the county has to say about an abandoned structure being suddenly reoccupied, and with that, she turned sharply, stormed back to her SUV, and slammed the door. The vehicle roared to life, gravel spraying as she sped down my drive and disappeared around the bend. I stood there, chest heaving, staring at the dust cloud she left behind. 3 years away, and this was the welcome I got. As I turned back toward the cabin, the sinking realization set in. This wasn't just about signs. This wasn't just about Karen being overbearing. This was going to be a war, and I wasn't about to lose my land without a fight.